Welcome to the RT Praise Network, where we are all about where ministry and business intersect. Practical advice, practical wisdom, and practical encouragement from the heart. Shows to help you connect, nurture, and grow your ministry, church, or business. Imagine having access to the best minds in ministry and business who will help you connect with people, nurture, and grow your ministry or business. This is what we do at RT Praise Network. We bring practical advice from real-life leaders that will help you succeed today. So sit back and relax. RT Praise Network is coming in hot.
Well, I want to welcome you to the RTPN Praise Network podcast. We are excited about what's happening on today. This is an impromptu. It's an impromptu, so we're just doing something, having some fun, because we're getting ready for something in the community. So I want you to stay tuned. I'm going to be looking over to this side because I'm looking at my stuff, but I want to introduce you to a young man that I've almost known pretty much all of his life. Oh, goodness, that makes me old. His name is Mr. Malik Morris. How are you doing, Malik?
I'm doing good, Pastor Howard. It's so good to be here in the studio with you, and I am excited to be here today.
Awesome. Well, let me correct myself. Reverend Malik Morris, right? So I want to say that because you said Pastor Howard, so I want to correct myself. Is that all right?
It's all right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is impromptu, right? So we're just having a conversation.
Yes, sir. But I am just Malik to you.
You're just Malik. Okay. It goes back to that soup thing that we were talking about before.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So hey, listen, while we're here, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me, you told me a little bit, but why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
All right. Well, it's good to do that. It's not that hard. I just did a introductory essay last night for my communications class, so I'm glad these are thoughts that were freshly on my mind.
Awesome.
My name is Malik Morris. I'm a Los Angeles native. I'm 22 years old. I've been in ministry since I was 13 years old. In addition to the fact that I am also in college, I am a senior at Faith International University. I am in my second year at Long Beach City College, obtaining my degree at Child Development. I've worked for LAUSD for the past 4 years. For the past 2 years, I've been blessed to serve as a teacher's assistant at the best elementary school on the planet.
The best one.
Elementary school.
You went to that?
Yes,
oh, wow.
Yes, Baldwin Hills Elementary, and now I'm back there giving back to the community and just growing and going forward in my young life.
Okay. So I know ministry is a part of your life, family, right?
Yes.
It's just a part of your life. It's not something that was, well, in the beginning, it was pushed on us, right? It was pushed.
Honestly, my story's a little bit different, actually.
Tell me about it.
I come from a lineage of wonderful pastors and preachers. My grandfather, great-grandfather, rather, is that of the late Dr. Manuel Scott Sr., very prevalent, one of Ebony Magazine's America's 15 Greatest Black Preachers, pastored here in Los Angeles for over 30 years at the Calvary Baptist Church, culminated his pastorship in Dallas as the pastor of St. John Baptist Church down there in Dallas, Texas, served with the National Baptist Convention as vice president and the secretary of evangelism under three tenured three tenured presidencies. So I have that, as well as my uncle is
Scott Jr.
Evangelist Dr. Magnus Scott Jr., who's literally all over the country. Probably on a plane or off a plane somewhere now if he's not preaching.
Right.
Hopefully he's sleeping. I stay on him about that.
That those words don't mean anything. No.
Don't mean anything to him. And then, of course, I have my grandfather, the one and only Dr. Curtis Morris Sr., who's also been an esteemed pastor in Los Angeles for over 40 years as well, who I was blessed to be raised by. But the beauty of my grandfather is my grandfather never pushed ministry on me. It was something that God literally walked me through the process, tugged on me, and pulled me to do. And my grandfather never really wanted me to follow him in the footsteps of ministry initially. He reared me. He raised me in church. I had a relationship with the Lord, but he wanted me to take more of the business side. And so I was looking forward to running the Morris Group with him and being able to grow in business with him in that way. But God had other plans, and here I am. It'll be 10 years.
Wow. So you preached your first sermon when you were how old?
13.
13 years young.
Yes, a month, not even a month, about a month after my 13th birthday.
Wow.
I preached my first sermon.
And I have to admit, I have not had you over at Southside yet.
No.
But that's going to change. That's going to change. We got it on recording. That is definitely going to change.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you let us know that it's more than just preaching. We still have to have that job that puts money in our pocket.
Oh, God,
we
yes.
still got to do other things, So I look at you saying that it's not wrong for me to be multifaceted in what I do as far as business-wise, because it seems like you're doing a whole lot. You're going to 2 schools,
Yes.
teaching in a school, and then working somewhere, right? You're doing all these things,
Yes,
right?
and I just started my first business.
What is that?
Creative Captures.
Creative Captures. Now, what people don't know, now, if y'all know what Creative Captures are, just go ahead and put it in the comments. But we're going to talk about Creative Captures because Creative Captures is more than just the saying. It's something creative that you put together that involves something, correct?
Yes.
And what does it involve?
It involves branding as a whole. I do photography. I'm doing videography. I do web design and graphic design.
Oh, graphic design.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I do that too.
Yes, I
See?
do.
Ah.
And just a sidebar, a lot of what I am endeavoring to do, I have looked up to you for so many years.
See, are you saying that because of the podcast?
I am not. And I think I told you
I'm going to
that
put
when
this
I
up there
walked
really
in.
quick. No.
Yeah, everything that I am endeavoring to do or things that I've even thought about doing, you have done it. You've always been a very innovative pastor who was ahead of the times that we were currently in. And so I just applaud you for the studio, applaud you for everything that you do, because I do look up to you in the regard of being multifaceted.
Well, thank you. My daddy always taught me, he said, money does not grow on trees. You got to work for it.
It does not.
And then in Thessalonians, it says, a man that does not work does not eat.
Right.
And so I grew up in a household where the father worked and the woman, the mother, had the opportunity to work, meaning she didn't have to, but she could. And so just like you said, with it being instilled, that's the way I run my household. My wife she works with me in our business, but it's never forced on her, because when my daughter was born 24 years ago, she was working at Northrop Grumman, had a good job, high clearance. And when my daughter was born, she was able to stay at home and raise my daughter from that point on. And so she has a heart for kids, a heart for the community. And so I love it that she's allowed to do that. But, hey, it's not bad. I enjoy what I do, because what I do puts food on the table, puts clothes on the back. And people say, well, how can you do ministry and do all of these other things? Ministry is the passion behind everything I do, because I believe, and I don't know whether or not anybody takes this, but ministry should be involved in every single thing you do.
Right.
Everything, whether it's real estate, ministry, whether it's insurance, ministry, because you're helping people get from one point to another. And so I'm curious to know, since and I know I'm throwing, these aren't prepared questions, y'all. These aren't prepared questions. So I'm curious to know, at age 13, because I know with me growing up in the church,
Yes.
And people always telling me, "Ooh, you're gonna be a preacher. You're gonna be a preacher.
Right.
You're gonna be a preacher because your grandfather's a preacher." So the fighting that I did was because people kept telling me I was going to be a preacher.
Yes. That was the exact
So
thing I went through.
at 13, what actually, and this isn't about me, so I'm not going to even tell you my story. It's about you. What at age 13 said, you know, forget about what people are saying. This is what God has called me to do.
It's funny that you say that. So leading up to 13, let's start there. I really initially felt the tug of God pulling on me in that direction when I was about 8 years old. I noticed that it was just a burning desire for me to go to church more. I found myself really gleaning from my grandfather in a different way, just sitting down and having him instill principles in me and just really, really gleaning from him in that way. But like you said, because of the tug of the church and everyone saying, you're going to be a preacher, you're going to be that, and I'm just a kid at the time, I wanted to do me. So a lot of people don't even know my paternal grandfather, my grandfather, Pastor Morris, is my maternal grandfather. My paternal grandfather was a photographer, very famous photographer at that, David Perry Sr. He's CEO of Photovisions. He shot Bishop Desmond Tutu, did NBA, Black Enterprise, Tavis Smiley show.
What people don't know, huh?
Just countless things. And so I felt myself being plugged in so many different directions because as a child, I really wanted to do photography and I wanted to go that route, but I also just felt the call of God on my life. So that was about 8 years old. 8 years old, I was simultaneously experiencing the call of God, but at 8 years old, my grandfather at that time, who began to take ill, I found myself clinging to him more and wanting to, be the next furthering factor in the family as a photographer with Photovisions. So that's 8. Between 9, 10, 11, and 12, I went through so many things personally, adversities, just fighting the will of God in my life.
That's a fight, isn't it?
It's a fight. Just the enemy, just had different things going on with me. Home life wasn't the best. Just me not being the best kid at school. The school I work at, I caused a lot of hell at that time. I thought
So that's why you're there.
You're
making amends.
I'm getting some payback too. I tell you, I get some payback. But I was, I was a class clown. I just wasn't, the best version, of what I could have been at that age. But no matter where I was, what I was doing, anybody who was in my life always reminded me that I had purpose. And so I'll never forget it. I was 12 years old and just going through a rough season. And when it was all said and done, I ended up in foster care. Home life was discombobulated. I ended up in foster care. And it was a similar situation where it was like you have all of the connections, all of the resources, you have a family, but yet you're in this constrained situation that nobody but God can really get you out of. And so about a month before I went into foster care, I just began to feel this burning desire to preach. It was on me heavy. And it was almost as if God was saying, if you don't, things are not going to get better. At that time, home life was a little discombobulated, and I just wanted to live with my grandparents. That was just, at that time, my grandparents were the major stability in my life, and it was like everything was prohibiting that from happening. And now I'm in foster care, and so here it is. I'm in foster care, and one day I just remember my grandmother gave me a scripture to meditate on, Philippians 4:8. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are kind, whatsoever things are lovely, think on these good things. And so I remember right before I went to foster care, I was just thinking about what that meant to me in that time in my life. And the Lord allowed me to open up my notebook and just start writing.
Wow.
Writing. I'll never forget that night. I was at my father's house. I don't even think he knows until this day. I wrote my first sermon on the couch at my father's house. And he said, "You're just writing so much." And I was just writing. And I wrote my first sermon. And then it went from writing to living, because everything I wrote was tested within the next coming months. And that's when I felt the confirmation through the controversy I was experiencing in my life at that time that God was calling me to preach.
Wow.
And when I accepted the call to preach, it was just weird how the Lord worked my life during that season. I go to foster care. My foster mother was a member of the Calvary Baptist Church of Pacoima. At that time, Apostle William T. Broadus was the pastor. I go there. I begin going to church out there. I did not know my great-grandfather's connections to that church. I did not know my grandfather's connections to the church. I didn't know any of that at that time. Apostle Broadus is sick. Bishop Broadus, who later became my godfather, is running things out there. And everything comes full circle. I find out that this church is connected to my family.
Wow.
And I accept my call to preach in Pacoima. And literally about 2 weeks later, the Lord allowed me to come home. And the rest is history.
See what happens when obedience is better than sacrifice.
Yes.
Man, well, y'all, listen. I'm going to, because we're going to keep this short. Listen, do you believe we've only been talking 16 minutes? You know,
wow.
That's
I mean,
it.
We can keep it
you
going,
know, we
Pastor.
keep it going. Listen, there is a question now, and I'm gonna yield because we need to know. I talked to some young people, you know, recently after the pandemic and everything that was going. So now the church is not as important to them. It's okay for them not to go to church on Sundays. What has, and I'm not going to say what do you think, because really it doesn't matter what we think, but what has the Lord spoken to you in regards to reaching the youth of the church? One thing that was powerful for me that God has put on my spirit heavily is that we spend too much time resaving the saved.
Ooh, perfect.
You know?
Perfect.
And I truly believe that when the words that we speak are so powerful that, you know, I spoke in our church, I said, we need more men in our church. We need more men coming in. And guess what? More men started coming in, but they weren't the men with the suits and the ties. They weren't the men that had the cologne. They were the men in halfway houses, the men that needed help but wanted to help. So how do you reach the youth of today post-pandemic?
It's funny that we say that. I'm a little bit different. I do not believe in the core of my heart that church is not important to youth. I feel like the disconnect comes from the fact that the youth feel like the church treats them as if they are not important.
Right.
I look up, and one of someone who I avidly follow, who's a powerful preacher who just became pastor, one of the greatest generals and minstrels of our generation, is now Pastor Mark Moore Jr. I don't know if you know him. He's out of Atlanta.
Okay.
His father is Bishop Mark Moore Sr., comes out the Apostolic Church. But Mark Moore started something about 7 years ago with millennials. He comes to Los Angeles very frequently by virtue of my big brother, Pastor Anthony P.G. Jr. He started the Young Leaders Conference, where he literally brought millennials together. And what he did was he didn't just focus on a convention that dealt with just church and youth. He brought millennials together in every creative aspect that interests them that he could. And he brought people and classes that just appealed to them where they were. Now from that grew from now having that. When he started it started off with only maybe 50. His last major conference that he had at the Georgia World Congress Center, it was over 5,000. From there, pandemic shuts down, world shuts down, but ministry is still revamped.
Right.
He begins a online ministry that most thought was a church called Spirit and Truth that literally averages close to 3,000 to 4,000, if not more, watching every Sunday night. Now he has now stepped into the pastorate of succeeding his father, Bishop Moore Sr., who is now went to Chicago. In the last 2 Sundays, he has had 3 Sundays rather. He has had over 90 guests and 60 people join. He created a studio similar to yourself for Spirit and Truth to be able to host worship settings. He opened that up as a church, and it's packed out every Sunday night with Gen Zs and millennials. But what's the difference between what he's doing versus what we're experiencing? It's not that church isn't important, but predominantly most of our churches have made millennials feel as if we are not important because we have become caught up with, like you said, resaving the saved.
So how do we break that barrier? How do we? I think I play the background pretty much. Right. It amazes me how many people know me and I don't know them.
Power is always behind the scenes. Dr. Morris told me that.
How do you? Because as you can see, I'm getting older. The gray is coming, and
you
so
still look young.
I'm not saying that I can't reach the youth. I'm not saying that because the word doesn't change, but the ways that it is produced, as far as presented, it does.
Got you.
So how would you speak to someone of my age, 59 this year, that I don't believe unless the Lord calls me real soon, there's no slowdown in ministry for me as a pastor. But yet and still, I do recognize the fact that I'm not as young as you are anymore. So the question that I'm asking is, how do we mirror that? Because, I'm not a convention person. Y'all forgive me. I'm not, if you're going to have a convention, have something that at the end of each service, you're inviting somebody to have a new relationship with Christ, because we keep resaving the saved. We need to have conventions where we need to have baptism conventions. And I learned this from the Southern Baptists. Baptism conventions are, you reach out to your neighborhood and you ask who doesn't know Christ, who wants to know Christ, who hasn't been baptized, and have a revival. And at the end of that revival, have a massive baptism. I'm only one person. I only can, I don't have all that strength behind me. But, that's where my mindset is. In my second half of ministry, 33 years, so I believe I'm on my second half. I get 30 years is the first half, I guess another 30, so I'm 3 years into my second half. So how do we do what he's doing effectively, even in our local community right now, in our Los Angeles community? How do we do that?
So it varies based off of regions. I understand. When we look at where Pastor Moore is, he's down south. They're more Bible Belt, Bible based.
Right. They'll go to church in the snow.
Yeah. Thank you.
It rains here. We stay home.
Yeah. It ain't even got to rain. It's too hot.
It's too hot. We stay home.
It's too windy. We stay home, and we will stay home for church, but we'll go to the day party. But we'll go to the day party.
Say it.
We'll go to the day party. We'll go to the beach. We'll go to all these other things. So the culture is totally different here because there is a paradigm shift in Los Angeles where, yes, youth don't feel like they're not that important in church, but they also use that lack of importance as leeway to be the foundation of them doing so many other things. When we look at how to fix that, I believe that if more senior pastors, not saying that they are not, but if more senior pastors are open to decreasing the criteria.
What criteria?
Well, I won't even say the senior pastors because I feel like no pastor really has a criteria on who comes into their church. That's not how pastors are wired. However, I feel like the culture of our churches have created a criteria that makes the unchurched feel uncomfortable, or we have created a culture of criteria
that we're perfect and you're not.
Yeah, we're perfect, you're not. Or for the youth that are in the churches, because I've seen churches and youth departments where there was a good cluster of youth that could have created something that could have been bigger over time. But because they didn't meet the criteria of the culture of the previous generation, and that previous generation is who's financing the leadership and who's financing these meetings, now instead of being open to allowing the youth and young adults somewhat have, understanding of this is a shift in the culture, and allowing that culture shift to come across, and not in a disrespectful way, but just naturally, without it being in a way where there is, some control or there's some disrespect or controversy. There's been more control and less compromise. And so
I think, the way I look at it with our youth, it's sort of, I use it as teaching responsibility. So I'll put my youth in charge of our audio, in charge of our video, and I'll tell them, hey, you got to be at your post at this particular time. If you're not at your post at this particular time, then you're missing something. So I try and steer it towards responsibility, being responsible for something in the church, rather than just sitting there and just, I got to listen to the preacher.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Because now you feel like you matter.
Right.
Now you feel like you matter. And I feel like for a lot of churches, the disconnect has been youth and young adults feel like they don't matter, and they feel like they don't have a place to matter. How many pastors have, flourishing elderly congregations, but they only have 10 to 15 youth.
And then when those flourishing members are gone,
there's nothing to replenish it.
Nothing. It's crazy.
So I think more pastors have to be open to, sharing and instilling responsibility, and also allowing the culture of the church to evolve to where there's more compromise between cultures and less controversy between cultures.
Ooh. Well, listen, we have done some talking. And guess what? We've been 27 minutes.
Wow.
Let me ask you a question. How can people get in contact with you if they want to invite you to their church to preach? I know you have to ask permission first, because you're from the old school.
Shout out to my pastor, Dr. Robert Arthur Williams, Dr. Ari Williams of the McCoy Church. I am from the old school. I do believe in asking my pastor whenever I go to preach, and I'm thankful for the permission to preach every time he allows me to go. And just one more thing, that's an example of someone who is open to sharing, in the criteria of it. My pastor is 100% old school. But one thing I love about my pastor is the culture of McCoy has evolved to where we have LED screens. He has live stream. He allows us to teach Sunday school as youth and young adults. We shoot highlight reels on Instagram. He has revolutionized, and he has created a space to where myself and the other youth and young adults of our church feel like we matter, and that's why we love him so much.
Well, we might as well here. Tell us what church you go to, address, what time you have worship. Go ahead and tell them.
I go to the McCoy Memorial Church, located at 802 East 46th Street in Los Angeles, California, right off of Vernon and Avalon. You drive right down the street, make a left coming off the 110 freeway. You'll see 46th Street. Make a right rather on Vernon, then make a left on 46. You are right there at that wonderful white building. My pastor's Dr. R.A. Williams. We start church at 9 o'clock, and he believes in 1 hour worship. We are still respecting COVID guidelines.
All right.
1 hour worship. We start at 9 o'clock. Choir sings. After that, pastor is up. offering and announcements are simultaneous. We don't waste any time being out of there. If you want to get in contact with me, you can always mail my church. My Instagram is Malik T. Morris, as well as Creative Captures with the K. I'm on Facebook as Malik Tyler Morris. Send me a messenger, send me a direct message, and I would be honored to connect with you.
That is awesome, because we've been trying to reduce. We're down to an hour and 15, 20 minutes now.
That's
so
amazing.
I'm trying to get it down to that hour. We're going to get it there. We going to get it
Still
there.
leave room for the Holy Spirit to have
Yes,
his way.
yes. Listen, I'm glad you all decided to join us on this impromptu session. And when I tell you it was impromptu, it was literally impromptu. But we're going to post this. We're going to make sure that we can do this again, because maybe this is a start of something. You know,
sir.
maybe this can be a start of something. So you guys have your questions, your comments, go ahead and put them down. You see how you can reach out to Raise the Praise, rtpnradio.net. We have a radio station too. All right, an internet radio station. So we want you to guys come and join us. Brother Malik, thank you. Reverend Malik, thank you. Malik, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I
And thank
appreciate you
Pastor
joining
Howard.
us here
I've
on today.
always admired you. Thank you for having me on tonight. I appreciate you, all that you're doing for the community, all that you're doing for my generation, how you have already paved the way for us as a generation. You are a legend in your own right. Little do you know it, just as a creative, as a pastor, how you balance everything all in one. God bless you. I honor you, and thank you again for this time.
God bless you. God bless you. We're going to go to station identification. We're going to let you know where it is, and we hope that you guys enjoy. God bless you and keep you is our prayer. So
You're listening to the RT Praise Network.